All right, so this is going to be another movie review. This one's called Mr. and Mrs. Smith, 1941. Giving this 1 out of 5 stars. I hated this flick. I didn't laugh a single time. My eyes were wandering and I got distracted. So it's a good thing we can go back over this plot because I wasn't paying too much attention. Matter of fact, I decided to take a nap after 10 minutes of this, and I haven't woken up since. Just call me Rip Van Winkle. No, I overslept this weekend. This past weekend, I should say. And I only got 4 movie reviews in. Here's number 5 in the past 3 days. 4 days, I should say. If you count Good Friday, which is where I got 3 of them in. Saturday, I only got 1 in because this movie was starting to irritate me big time. Let's look at the movie poster. I'm giving this one 1 out of 5 stars. I hated this flick. Carol Lombard, Robert Montgomery, Mr. and Mrs. Smith with Gene Raymond, Jack Carson, Lucille Watson. Philip Merivale. Don't know any of these people. I just know Carol Lombard. And it's directed by Alfred Hitchcock. Mr. and Mrs. Smith is a 1941 U.S. screwball comedy film directed by Alfred Hitchcock, written by Norman Krasna, and starring Carol Lombard and Robert Montgomery. It also features Jim Raymond, Jack Carson, Philip Merivale, and Lucille Watson. Mr. and Mrs. Smith was the only pure comedy Hitchcock made in the United States, although he later claimed to have done it only as a favor to Lombard. Files at RKO show that Hitchcock himself actively pursued the project. Anne and David Smith are a married couple living in New York City who, though in love, have disagreements that last for days before they can reconcile. This is Robert Montgomery and Carol Lombard. One morning, Anne asked David if he would marry her again if he had to do it over. Although he says he's very happy with her now and would not marry anyone else, he says that he would not because it meant the loss of his freedom and independence. Okay. Well, I guess I shouldn't talk since I've been divorced twice. And I did take it lightly because neither of my wives were Catholic. All right. Production company RKO Radio Pictures, distributed by RKO Radio Pictures. Release date January 31st, 1941. Running time 94 minutes, not too bad. Country United States. Language English. Budget $740,000. Box office $1.4 million. All right. So getting back to the beginning of the movie, we're still on the same day. Later that day, Harry Deaver, an Idaho County official, informs David at work that due to a jurisdictional mishap, their 3-year marriage in Idaho was not valid. Since Deaver is a family acquaintance of Anne's from Idaho, he stops by her apartment to tell Anne and her mother the same thing. Anne does not mention this to David, believing he will remarry her that very night when he invites her to a romantic dinner at the restaurant they frequented before they were married. When they arrive at the restaurant, it has declined in quality and it has become run down. While there, David does not bring up the subject of marriage, and they eventually return home. Anne grows impatient and confronts David, accusing him of not wanting to marry her again. David protests. David claims he was going to ask her shortly, but Anne dismisses him and kicks him out of their apartment. David spends the night at his club, but when he goes home after work the next day, Anne's maid refuses him entry. And she takes his pen. David waits in the lobby. David sees Anne return with an older gentleman. Believing the man is her suitor, David becomes angry and disheartened. David intercepts Anne. David threatens to withhold financial support. He gets her fired from her new job. The older gentleman is both her suitor and her new boss. And he doesn't hire Mary for good reason. He wants to date him. Anne tells David she has no intention of ever marrying him again. Well, here we go, David. She's wide open for anyone. And there's nobody in the chat room again for the last 40 days. David's friend and law partner, Jefferson Jeff Custer, tells David he will walk in. Jeff will persuade her to remarry. However, when David arrives that evening, he finds that Jeff has instead agreed to legally represent Anne. And Jeff goes through the various legal outcomes. Jeff asks Anne to dinner the following night in David's presence. David tells Anne that if she agrees to the date, their marriage is over. But Anne accepts the invitation nonetheless. Does she want to stay married? Apparently not. After dinner, Anne and Jeff go to the 1939 New York World's Fair, but they become stuck on the parachute ride and they are exposed to hours of rain, many feet up in the air. When they go back to Jeff's apartment, he plans to put on dry clothes and return to the fair, but Anne feeds the teetotaler medicinal liquor ostensibly to prevent a cold, and he becomes drunk and returns home. Anne and Jeff continue to date, and Anne meets Jeff's parents. They decide to take a vacation with Jeff's parents at a Lake Placid skiing resort, the same resort where Anne and David had earlier been planning to holiday. Upon arriving at the resort, they find that David has rented a cabin next to theirs. When confronted, David faints. David pretends to be sick and delirious while Anne fawns over him. When Anne discovers his deception, she becomes furious. While they engage in a heated argument, Jeff walks in. He knows Anne and David are meant for each other when Anne tries to manipulate Jeff into fighting David. Anne decides she wants to get away to the lodge by ski, even though she does not know how to ski. David offers to help her put on her skis, but instead, David places her in a position that prevents her from standing up. As she struggles and threatens him, she frees one foot, but then feigns helplessness by reattaching the ski. Robert Montgomery and Carol Lombard. What a horrible couple they are. Lousy and annoying. Stupid and silly. Alfred Hitchcock can be seen passing Montgomery in front of his apartment building, walking from left to right and smoking a cigar as the camera pulls back at 42 minutes 58 at 42 minutes and 58 seconds into the film. So I forgot to give Hitchcock director credit and acting credit. What's wrong with me tonight? I'm losing it, man. I guess I should put his name in the tags too. All right. There we go. To the delight of the crew, Lombard herself directed Hitchcock in the brief scene, forcing him to redo his very simple part many times. Norma Krashna came up with the basic idea of Mr. and Mrs. Smith under the working titles of Who is that lady I seen you with? And No for an Answer. Norman Krashna pitched it to Carol Lombard, who was enthusiastic. She sold the idea to George F. Schaefer of RKO, who agreed to buy the project from Krasna. Then Alfred Hitchcock became involved. In the 1939 interview, What I Do to the Stars, Hitchcock is about to leave England for Hollywood, and he says he would like to make a film with Lombard, casting her not in one of her superficial comedies, but in a serious role, because he believes she could be as good a serious actor as Paul Muni or Leslie Howard. The result was Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Hitchcock was never happy with the result and was later dismissive of the film. Well, he's probably mad that I put his name as in the description here. He's probably rolling in his grave. Mr. and Mrs. Smith was the last film released before Lombard's death. To Be or Not to Be, 1942, was her final film, released 2 months after she died in an aircraft crash while on a war bond tour. Serves her right. The film is one of the earliest to show a pizzeria, and it was supposed to contain sounds of toilet flushing, which was altered to banging pipes for reasons of censorship. Mr. and Mrs. Smith made a profit of $750,000. When the film premiered at the Radio City Music Hall, the review in the New York Times described it thus: despite the performances, despite the endless camera magic with which Mr. Hitchcock tries to conceal the thinness of the material, Mr. and Mrs. Smith have their moments of dullness. The whole movie was dull. What are you talking about? The result is a chucklesome comedy that fails to mount into a coruscating wave of laughter. I didn't even laugh once at any of this. And the sound was so bad on the free rip on YouTube that I had to look at the subtitles, because I had both the sound on my Chromebook and the sound on YouTube turned up full blast, and I still couldn't hear. Am I losing my hearing, or Is my Chromebook crapping out, or is it just a really, really bad sounding print? Variety reviewers were more enthusiastic about the film, noting Alfred Hitchcock pilots the story in a straight, farcical groove, with the result to slapstick interludes or overplaying by the characters, pacing his assignment as a steady gait. Hitchcock catches all of the laugh values from the above par script of Norman Krasna. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, Mr. and Mrs. Smith holds an approval rating of 64%. That's pretty decent. On 22 reviews with an average rating of 5.8 out of 10, again, decent rating. I think people like this just because it has Alfred Hitchcock's name on it. Looks sort of like what Karate Man does with his recommendations. Although I'll give him credit, he is rather thorough when it comes to recommended series like the Kickboxer series. And I still haven't seen Kickboxer 5. I'm really bummed about that. Lux Radio Theater adopted Mr. and Mrs. Smith to radio on June 9th, 1941, with Carol Lombard and Bob Hope. The Screen Guild Theater next adopted it on February 8th, 1942, with Errol Flynn and Lana Turner. Again on December 14th, 1942, with the great Joan Bennett, Robert Young, and Ralph Bellamy. And once more on January 1st, 1945, with Preston Foster, Louise Alberton, and Stuart Irwin on January 30th, 1949. It was adopted to Screen Directors Playhouse with Robert Montgomery, Mary Jane Croft, and Carlton Young. All right. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, 1941, 1 hour, 35 minutes, decent runtime, but still, none of it really grabbed me at any moment during those hour of 35 minutes of torture. Gets a whopping 6.3 out of 10 on IMDb, 12,000 ratings, which is pretty low for a Hitchcock film. A couple who have been married for 3 years are shocked to learn that their marriage is not legally valid. All right, here's a more flattering review from Barracuda. The title of the review is Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And Barracuda gives it a 6 out of 10. I'm giving it a 2 out of 10. But if I could, I'd give it a 1 out of 10. You know, like the new Snow White movie territory, or Frozen Flesh. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, 1941. Barracuda review of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And the title of the review is also Mr. and Mrs. Smith. The date of the review on IMDb is October 24th, 2016. There's a lot of stuff here, so let's get to it. The most surprising entry from the filmography of Alfred Hitchcock is his 1941 film, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Hitchcock claimed he made the film as a favor to lead actress Carol Lombard. Mr. and Mrs. Smith is the only screwball comedy the famous suspense director ever made. Starring along with Carol Lombard is Robert Montgomery. The pair plays a married couple who find out that their marriage is unofficial. And instead of going through the legal paperwork to make their union legal, they question each other and their feelings. Out of his element, Hitchcock put forth a classic comedy that oddly still feels like a Hitchcock film, a true treat for the series fan as they wade through Hitch's body of work. It was not a treat, it was a trick. Elite New York couple Ann Smith, played by Carol Lombard, and David Smith, played by Robert Montgomery, have enjoyed an affectionate, loving, wedded bliss for 3 years after individual visits from their lawyers. However, they learned that a municipal technicality prevented their union from being legally recognized. What should be a simple fix turns into a possible breakup for the couple as they start to wonder how much in love with each other they truly are. The day the couple was told of the technicality, David commented over breakfast that if he were to start his life over, he would never marry. Despite his love for his wife, David feels as though an immense amount of sacrifice of himself has taken place due to his marriage to his wife. That comment has stuck with Anne as she decides what to do about her defunct marriage to her husband. Anne decides that a separation is in order and begins to live the life of a single woman, even readopting her maiden name. As Anne enjoys her new life and freedoms, David sets his sights to stop at nothing to win back the devotion of his wife. Isn't that nice? Winning back Anne's hand becomes much more difficult as she begins dating other men. As David becomes increasingly more disgruntled with life without his wife, he begins to realize that maybe he wouldn't remove his wife from his life if he had the chance to do it again. I guess David is lonely now that he did pay attention to her when she wanted to get a legitimate marriage. He was paying her no never mind. And now he's having regrets about doing that. As a fan of classic cinema, I was both surprised and embarrassed to realize that this was the first film I had seen of classic star Carol Lombard. That is embarrassing. I was happy to change that status and finally see her of a film. I found Lombard's acting exceptional and engaging, and I cannot wait to see more of her work. Okay, this film is a lot of fun with the slight nods to silent cinema it seems to employ. The ways in which Mr. and Mrs. Smith plays out like a silent film proved to be perfect match to the plot of men's and women's relationship of the 1940s. As Lombard gains independence, she enjoys life without her husband more, therefore illustrating the liberation of women in the 40s. Great. Although Mr. and Mrs. Smith has a very Howard Hawks feel to it, it is also clear that there are many aspects recognizable of Hitchcock's touches. For instance, this journey through Alfred Hitchcock's filmography, I've grown quite fond of the way in which the auteur films faces, that same unique way faces are filmed, are presented in this film and are fun to watch. Sure, the film is a comedy, therefore Hitchcock touches are few and far between, but the film doesn't feel foreign to fans of Hitchcock, and one can see his touches in it throughout the film. Fans of Hitchcock must see this film, if for no other reason, just to see the famous suspense director trying his hand at comedy. Although, if given a chance, one won't be disappointed with the Carol Lombard film either. I was. I don't know what this person's talking about. Anyways, like he likes Hitchcock and Carol Lombard. As I say, just put Hitchcock's name on any movie and it's bound to get a high rating. Even Carol Lombard, for that matter. Stage Fright. Oh, more like the Stage Fright under Capricorn, I Confess, and Secret Agent. Carol Lombard directed Sir Alfred Hitchcock's cameo, and Carol Lombard made him do repeated takes because the Smiths entered into the marriage in good faith and were unaware at the time that the marriage was invalid. Their marriage is, in fact, still legal under U.S. law. So basically, this movie is a bunch of horse manure. Quotes, trying to get into an old dress of hers, and says, I can't imagine anything hanging in the closet shrinking so much. This was featured in Crimes and Misdemeanors, 1989. The soundtracks, The Sidewalks of New York, 1894, uncredited. Music by Charles Lawler in the score during scenes at Mama Lucy's. Release date, April 12th, 1941 in Mexico. Country of origin, U.S. Language, English, also known as Casados y Descasados. Casados y Descasados. Filming location, RKO Studios, 780 North Gower Street, Hollywood, Los Angeles, California, USA. Production company, RKO Radio Pictures. Technical specs, runtime, 1 hour, 35 minutes. Black and white, aspect ratio, 1.37 to 1. All right. So I hated this flick. One of the worst Hitchcock movies. Jeff Jaffe said Torn Curtain is one of the worst. And it's definitely down there, but I think there are a handful that are even worse than Torn Curtain. So this is what happens when you're a Hitchcock completist. You get the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is the ugly. All right, going down the pike, here's my movies list. Top of the list, number 1 is Free: A Journey into the Inner Self, 2023. Then we've got Captain Kidd, 1945, and Crank, 2006. Another Credit Man recommendation. So there you have it. my 5th review in 4 days. I was planning to do 10 or so, but I ended up getting lazy and taking naps, especially when faced with the torture of sitting through Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I sat through about 10 minutes on Saturday and I had enough. I was ready for a little nappy poo, which I did not wake from until the following morning. And so now I'm here on Monday, torturing myself, having to watch the last 1 hour and 25 minutes. And it was just as bad the first 10 minutes. Hey, at least you can say this movie is consistently bad. There's no one point where I said, "Oh, this is a really cool thing happening here," because there is no such part of the movie that makes me think that. Anyways, I'm probably in the minority. Let me know what you think of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Hitchcock's only attempt at screwball comedy. I generally do not like screwball comedies from the 1940s for this reason. They're just not funny. They may have been funny back in the day, but they do not age well, is what I'm trying to say. So that's the end of my review, and I'll try to get to this other stuff. But Saturday, I've got an MRI followed by some attorney preparation for my deposition. So that would be fun. I better clean my bachelor pad here for the attorney visit. I gotta at least clean the toilet and the restroom there. I've been kind of living like a slob for the past, I don't know, year and a half. So, yeah, it's time to do some cleaning. So I'll be doing that Friday night or Saturday morning or both. And also my son has confirmation in a couple weeks. I've got my good church friend Terrence Collins coming over here to spend the night. So we're going to drink beers, have some icy cold beers, wolf down some pizzas, and watch some movies. Maybe I can get him to review some movies on my channel later.